Moshe's spies were commanded to the spies of Yehoshua were sent to Jericho.
Okay, so they were sent to Jericho. Moshe's spies were sent to
Israel.
The whole land. What's the other difference?
They had to go to.
They had to go to Jericho. They were commanded to go to Jericho, whereas Moshe, Hashem said, I'm not commanding you. Good, those are the two differences. Very good. And then we said that basically what's the difference between Jericho in terms of the perpetual conquest of the land, which is something also spiritual, represents sent. Who remembers why we said Jericho represents, well, Jericho represents sent because the word means sent, reach. But why? What is the idea of scent in Chassidus, we say?
It's related to smell. It's related to garments because garments is related to smell.
Why is garments related to smell? Right, so the levushim of Machshava Dibur Maisa, the garments. Why is garments related to smell?
You gave an answer. I know because in the Zohar it says
right. So there's basically a Zohar that relates them. What's sort of the more?
Oh, it's like it's in the same way. It's kind of like it's not the thing itself, but it's kind of an echo of the thing.
Exactly right. Like the it's not the thing itself, right? Like for example, what's as opposed to the garments, there's the actual body, right? The body is like you. So the garments is not really you. It's just sort of something that like wafts off of you, like scent. So too, the something that has a scent, right? You're not dealing with the thing itself. You're something like exhaust that sort of comes off of it. Okay, very good. So we said, since we answered a few questions already. Then, since not everyone's in possession of their ability to really change their essential midos, right? The actual spheros, the seven midos represent the 7 nations of Canaan. This idea of sending to spy out and therefore to investigate to see if you can conquer the 7 nations of Canaan is not something which is really in everybody's capability, and therefore it's not shaykh to make everybody do it. You can't command a person to do something they can't do. Whereas when it comes to the garments of thought, speech, and action, this is within everybody's ability to change. Therefore, we can have a commandment to go and spy out the garments in order to change them. Fine, that's what we set up until now. Look, let's go on to Os Gimel. And we say like as follows. Hine haTorah hi nitzchis. The Torah is eternal. When we move on to Shemesuper b'Torah gam shemuach hamaradim de Moshe. Right, first of all, before we ask, why did Moshe send the spies to spy out the whole land voluntarily, even though he wasn't commanded? So why did he do it at all? We said last time also. In other words, was he just setting them up for something that was impossible? So we said not necessarily. If you have the level of Moshe, then you can do it, right? So if Moshe is sending the spies, that's like on a different level. He's empowering you to be able to be on his level. The shaliach takes the place of the mishaleach, and so if Moshe is going to send the spies, then it's somewhat reasonable, but it can't be like a command for all time. So we said that the Torah is nitzchis, and this that it also speaks in the Torah about sending Moshe spies, the Torah kol haaretz, the entire Aretz. Seemingly, why do we even need to know about this? Hu hora nitzchis lekol echad ve'echad miYisrael. It is an eternal instruction for all the Jewish people as well. First, let's explain what it says in Tanya. Regarding a tzaddik and a beinoni, she'avodas habeinim hi beikar belevushi hanefesh. We're dealing with the avoda of the beinoni. It's primarily, he says, you're dealing with only the garments of the soul. What's the beinoni's job? Right, is to work with his thought, speech, and action. Machshava dibur maisa. That's why the Tanya says that really anyone could do this. Shegam k'shalev chomer misa ve'eze tava b'yecholtu lisapek limshol baruch tavaso shebelivo shlo lemaloso b'masa dibur machshava. So translation, why is this the attribute of all man to be a being? You control your thought, speech, and action? Because even when the heart will desire, right? Whatever desire might be, you can hold it back, and you can basically dominate on your taiva, which is burning in your heart, at least to not let it out in thought, speech, and action. What you can't do is you cannot stop yourself from having the taiva in your heart, but you can stop, so to speak, the exhaust, right? You can change the expression. In other words, and he says, but for example, how can you stop it in your thoughts? The thoughts might come up out of the heart and like sort of visit you, but then to stop them from flowing and sort of cut off the perpetuation of this feeling, that is within your control, even to stop it from the level of thinking. Very, very deep work, right? But you can basically just starve, essentially, this meter that wants to come up by averting your thoughts to something else and sort of not letting it come out. You still might have this burning in your heart, but you don't let it come out. Let's look at footnote number 15. Since we all learned the mimer, let's go a little bit deeper. So he says, that seemingly is the intention in the Tanya over there in chapter Yud Zayin. We can now understand what he says after this, that you can remove your mind from it completely. Hesech hadas means to take your mind off something. In other words, you can get to such a point.
Remove that thought from your brain completely.
Basically, yeah, you can. You're only still working with your thought, your processes of thought. But the idea is that you can actually get to the point where you don't think of it at all, right? It actually becomes completely removed. In other words, it's taking your mind off something is really basically because you've put something else in its place. You sort of like got accustomed to not thinking about it.
That was basically saying everything's in your head. Is that basically what that?
He's saying that it's all controllable by your head. He's not saying that you don't have certain nature otherwise, right? It's not all in your head in the sense that it's not a real experience that you're having, this taiva, and it's actually beyond your control, and it's not in your head. You're not making it up.
It's in your control to remove it.
It's in your control to remove it, right? That's the meaning of a beinoni. So there's 2 levels. It was actually 3 levels, right? There's not to think about it, right? Willfully, which means you don't like sort of obsess about it, and that's just kind of the worst thing you can do, just like letting it in. But then there's a stage 2, which is to actually remove your mind from it. And then there's a stage 3, lagamre, right? So sort of you can actually just fix yourself in that sense, at least behaviorally. Valderek Zeb, Perik Yud Dalet, still in this footnote, he says similarly in the chapter 14, Lasos l'daber lachshov gam mashu neged taivas libo. You can go further than that. You can actually like flip it and do and say and think even things which are totally opposing your actual taiva inside of yourself. In other words, you just essentially change your behavior to the point that your behaviors are almost like in exact opposition to your inner, chemistry structure. Right? And he adds on this the same concept. You can overcome to the point that you actually completely remove it from your mind entirely. Now we can understand he uses this same phrase in 2 places to remove it from your mind, but he says that you have to overcome, like overpower it and remove it from your mind. Right? Rabbi leaves this as od tzrich iyun, but basically because he's saying that there's 2 levels essentially of hesech das, right? One is like to be misgaber, which means pushing it to a greater level, and it comes to the state of legamre, right? So in other words, in that very realm of removing it from mind, there's different levels and there's work. Some you can achieve more or less naturally. Some you have to use as extra gevuras in order to do it and take it to the next level. In any case, we see from all these examples that it's completely in your power to remove yourself from these things. Going back inside, right? You see in 4 lines up from the bottom of this paragraph. Masha ein kain. Avoros tzadikim. He beikar b'mido shebelev. Whereas the work of the tzadikim is primarily happening in not in your garments, but in your actual midos, ava v'yira, right? In other words, your love and your fear of God. Ve'ein kol adam zocher lezeh. Not everyone can actually dominate themselves on this level, meaning to say, most people do have loves for gashmias, and they do have loves which are self-satisfying, and they do have fears of anxieties of the world, that something's going to get. They're not like in a perfect state of trust where they fear nothing but Hashem. This is like you're human, right? And therefore, to go into that level of depth inside of your soul and to actually work on your midos so that you only have a love for God and you only fear Hashem, right? This is not everyone's zocha, meritorious to actually be able to address themselves on such a deep level. As it says in Tanya, something which is given over to the heart, in other words, on a deeper level of your animal soul, you don't have free choice so much, right? This is just like, for example, if we're saying that there's a parallel between your garments and your body. Your garments is your thought, speech, and action. Your body, therefore, is your midos. You don't have much free choice on your body either, right? I know you'd love to be like a black woman jazz singer. This didn't come up in your lot. It's not who you are. Work something else out there, Yehoshua. You're doing good. I'm just joking around, man. You look great, just as you are. L'chaim, l'chaim. The point is that these things are not within your free choice. Maybe in today's society, you can identify as you wish. Ela sha'afal pi kain. So nonetheless, mashbin l'kol echad v'echad miYisrael tiyeh tzaddik. So we have a little bit of an issue here. You're still told, and actually you're under oath before you come into this world to be a tzaddik. And this is associated with what we started the paragraph with, which is that even the spies of Moshe are written into the Torah. The Torah is eternal, it's for all man. Seemingly, Moshe's spies not relevant for us, because you can't control your midos. Here too, we see that we're sworn to be a tzaddik. That everyone needs even to try to be a tzaddik, as it says in Tanya.
So someone could get to, even though you don't merit, you can. Not everyone merits to get to that level. You can work on it and get to that level if you want.
There's certain things you can do in order to make yourself roy and prepared to be a tzaddik, to become tzaddik, right? Because it says how a person actually can become a tzaddik. It's just not so much in your free choice. But you can become a Beinoni, and if you become a Beinoni, then a tzaddik soul can sort of impregnate you, and you can all of a sudden have the abilities to, with the tzaddik's power now inside of you, to do the work of a tzaddik. So it is possible. So in other words, it's still something to work for. It's just that you can't. It reminds me sort of the idea of Shavuos. We talk about this idea of the 49 days, right? And each one of the 49 days you can count. The fact that you can count it means it's like sort of in your hands to wield that energy and bring down that light, right? Shnei yamim la'omer, shlosha yamim la'omer. These are yamim, are lights, right? And they're lights building up to the 49 levels of Bina. And when it comes to all the levels of Bina, you can actually have an arousal from below, which sort of is like, it can summon the arousal from above because it's within your control. But once you get to all 49 gates and you want Shavuos to come, if you'll notice, we don't count the 50th day. And the reason is because you can't count it because it's not in your power to determine, it's not in your free choice to determine that light comes for you. That's why it's called Matan Torah. It's a gift. However, someone who doesn't count the 49 days is not really fit for having that gift, right? You have to do everything you have to do, and then that's what it's called. I'm trying to become a tzaddik. I'm trying to count to the 50th gate. What are you talking about? You can only count to 49 gates. The 50th gate is completely outside of your control. Fine, but what is inside of my control is to make myself 49 ready, and then, I've done my work to become a tzaddik. So it's still relevant to take this oath and basically work on it, because it could happen, and you have to do your part. It's just the only thing is your part's not sufficient. It requires like some assistance from above, but it's still something you have to work on. And therefore, you can take an oath that I'm going to work on such a thing. Yeah.
So when the Benoni has a ego or a tzaddik, he himself is considered a tzaddik?
Yeah, he reaches the level of tzaddik, yeah.
What's a equal?
Impregnation. Spiritual.
My feeling is that in our generation, the Rebbe really gave us like a hack, which is a borrowed word from our modern society, which I don't really feel like it plays in well, just the notion of it, because like stealing something. But it's the idea is like a shortcut, right? A secret key. Meaning to say, if you look at, I take one example. I don't want to take the whole class in this direction because it's like a kind of a big idea, but I do think it's relevant to this point. You know the example of Sukkah and Suda Shlishi. These two ideas that Chabad has kind of some interesting minhagim that differ from the rest of the world on these two particular things, and they're connected with each other. They have the same reason, right? We don't sleep in the sukkah, and we don't eat bread at the third meal, to the ire of most of our Jewish colleagues. And what's the sort of reason behind it is because they're kind of both the same thing. The sukkah, we learn from the Mittler Rebbe, it has these makifim of bina, it has these very high level of lights, and basically he can't sleep in front of, it's like going into the Kodesh HaKadoshim and taking a nap. It's just like impossible. You can't sleep. You're like aware and enlightened and awakened in front of this revelation. And the same thing when it comes to the third meal, this time of the week, which is the end of Shabbos, Rivin de Rivin, it's like the will of all wills. Hashem's like sort of highest levels that are achievable are revealed at that time. And it's not shy to just like dive into a big loaf of bread, right? The eating has to be more subtle. And he says to the point that if there's a heter in both cases to not sleep in a sukkah. What's the heter? I mean, it's tire. It pains you. So if it's raining or windy or cold, you are putter from the sukkah. So too, if you're full and you're pained from eating bread, you're putter. So al pi halacha, there's a heter in both of these cases to not sleep in the sukkah and not eat the bread, but you have to be pained. And the idea is that when it comes to a real tzaddik, his pain is a spiritual pain, and he means it. In other words, he can't sleep in the sukkah. It would pain him to sleep in front of God. He can't eat bread. It would pain him to eat in front of God, right? So they have a heter, but where's your heter, right? That's for people who experience spirituality in such a high degree. But what about the rest of us? So we should be pater from, we should have to eat bread and we should have to sleep in the sukkah. So Rebbe says that because you follow the Rebbe, right? And because the Rebbe has pain from this, and you would have pain to not act like him, because you know that it's there, and he's told you basically that it's there, and you're a chassid of his, so you don't have his pain, but you have your pain, which is I would be pained to go against the minhag Chabad, right? Even as a simple person, I would be bummed out in my spiritual avoda if all of a sudden I started eating bread, knowing that that's just not what the Rebbe is doing, that that's not what's going on right now. Spiritually, it bothers me. And because he let us in on this secret, I too can experience spiritual pain on my level. And suddenly what comes out from this? I'm not eating bread on the third meal, and I'm not sleeping in a sukkah, which means I'm following the minhagim of tzaddikim, which is really supposed to not be relevant to me at all. It's just that it was sort of some genius tzaddik figured out a halachic way to put me in his place and enable me to keep the Torah on the way that a tzaddik keeps the Torah, even though I'm not a tzaddik, right? So this type of thing is an example, really, of the whole Chassidus. Mashbi'in ototi tzaddik can be seen in this whole way, right? How it can be swear to be a tzaddik. It's basically like swearing to be a chassid, essentially. And to enter yourself into this sort of realm where the Rebbe is changing Yiddishkeit, even the notion of like sort of being happy all the time and having this midah of betachon, which is sort of new in its old idea, but to actually live in such a way where you're practicing betachon on such a level. It's for like high level people. And here the Rebbe wants to share with every single person. It's like you're all of a sudden embodying a level of avoda which is really not intended for you, and you were sort of led in through this hack, right? So this is also a way of understanding that the whole Tanya, when it's telling you be a tzaddik, it is talking to you. Yeah.
But Can we honestly be like saying that causes this pain though? Like, there's lots of things the Rebbe does. I'm sure that many of us don't copy him exactly everything he does.
But not everything that he tell us to do, right? In other words, there was. I don't know if you're aware of this, but like, let's say, for example, before the Rebbe's Sicha on, let's say, Sudah Shlishi, we didn't even know about the fact that this already started with the Alter Rebbe. That none of them ate bread. In fact, the Alter Rebbe himself ate bread at the third meal before Peterburg, and he stopped afterwards. Peterburg was like the imprisonment of ended in Yutes Kislev. So this is like a Hasidic secret, a Chabad Hasidic secret, which was kept from us until the Rebbe told us. So everybody ate bread. In fact, there's Alter Hasidim that really couldn't get out of the minhag. And I saw like very, very, very important Hasidim eating bread for the third meal. And like the younger sort of Chevra were like, yeah, like, I don't know, you didn't read the Sikh, I don't know. Like they don't get mixed in with their business because they did it their whole life. But the reality is, the younger ones read the Sikha. How can you read that Sikha and eat bread? Yes, it would actually pain you. Not because of spirituality, of the godliness that's happening at that time. Because like some people, for example, it pains them if they miss a Shacharis. It pains them if they don't get up for Chassidus. That's a real pain that you can feel when you like prepare yourself and into a certain seder of avoda. At first, you just walk into yeshiva day one, you sleep in for a week. You're not pained over such a thing. Once you understand that you're like involved in a certain serious matter over here, right? It's like a tamim is doing the avoda in the Beis Hamikdash. You got to keep your seder. So if you miss something, you can't. When you go to bed at night and you do your reflections on the day, Kriyas Shema Lamita, you're like, man, I'm not going to do that again. I'm pained over that. I'm going to get up 5 minutes early, make sure I hit the mikvah on time. Yes, these things pain you as a regular person.
That's like daily things.
Well, even more so if it's a chag, or even more so if it's mama's deriving, right?
Really tap into that level of like feeling like pain over it.
Wait a second. I'm trying to explain something to you. Because daily versus weekly versus yearly. Explain why there's a difference. Like in on the contrary, something which is less frequent. You like in other words, you missed the shofar. You could cry for a year.
I'm saying daily because maybe you could feel pain that you have a habit and that you miss something in your usual schedule. I'm saying on the Chag, where like maybe it was probably like I don't know if we're gonna like feel connected to be like the super.
If you didn't hear the shofar one year, how would you don't answer for yourself, but I can answer for many people. They would be worried the whole year. I missed the shofar. I'm worried the whole year. I'm mamish like something horrible happened, right?
Like
a person who's sitting on it doesn't matter if it's a commandment or not a commandment. Is what I'm trying to say. Or let's say I only heard 60 blasts of the shofar. I didn't hear the extra 30 blasts you're supposed to hear to confuse the Satan. Anything. Maybe this isn't ringing true for you, but trust me, it rings true for many people, and they're not tzaddikim, right? If you blemish your intended way of avodas Hashem, you feel disappointed 100%. And how much more so if it's something that the Rebbe specifically told you that you should feel disappointed if you're connected with me. It was when the Rebbe came out with the Sikha, it was also an instruction that if you're a chassid, you would feel pain by not fulfilling the Rebbe's words. He said it just like that. So now you're going to be a chassid and you're not going to feel that pain. If you ate bread, you're going to feel like, what kind of a chassid am I? You're going to have to go do tshuva for this.
I don't know, I'm just saying, hypothetically, if you don't really feel that pain, should you then be eating bread and sleeping in the sukkah?
That's a question of your hiskashrus, right? In other words, if you don't really care, so maybe not. Maybe you're not like ready to take it on, because the one thing we don't want is for people to pretend too much to be Hasidim right in the beginning, because why? No, it's okay. There is an Indian of pretending. The Rebbe actually said, the Alter Rebbe said it. There's a Mishnah. It says a person shouldn't pretend to be a cripple. And there's a Mishnah. It says you're not allowed to go around pretending to be a cripple. You're not allowed to go around pretending to be blind. You have to be careful. You're not allowed to like sort of pretend. Why? Because if you pretend, it's going to happen to you. So the Rebbe said the same thing with the chassid. If you pretend to be a chassid, it'll happen to you. So I'm not saying you shouldn't pretend to be a chassid. I think you should pretend to be a chassid, but at what rate and at what stakes? Meaning to say, if you're going to go ahead and put on a black hat and a black jacket and run around the whole 9 yards, but you don't really feel it, then you might take it off. And then that's going to actually have a negative effect on your growth. If you ever want to put it back on again, you're going to feel like, what am I? Like I changed my whole identity over here, and I didn't even really mean it. So on that level, before you take on certain external changes, you for sure want to grow into it to a point where you mean business, right? But in this case, I'm not sure if you shouldn't actually not eat bread. I believe you should not eat bread. If you're close enough to basically realizing that this stuff is real.
You don't have that heter.
If you have a heter in the sense that you're pretending to be a chassid, right? You're pretending to be a chassid. In other words, you want to be a chassid. You believe that the Rebbe is the Nasi Adur, right? And you believe that the Torah is true. Just what? A person could be so grub that basically he also doesn't. It doesn't bother him if he doesn't go to a mikveh in a day, or maybe he missed a tefillah. You know, in other words, he's got like a sort of mental disconnect between what he actually believes to his intensity of his Yetzer Hara, which is stopping him from having these healthy feelings of regret and remorse if he does something wrong, right? So you can, depending on issue by issue, what you should pretend to be a chassid, which those things will give you good habits and build up proper experience. In other words, in order to get yourself into the right mindset, I think it could be detrimental to just say, I'm not a chassid, I'm going to eat bread, because I don't feel anything. Then you're basically just allowing yourself to fall into a lackadaisical experience. I don't care. And that could also negatively affect you. So it's a subtle thing, but you're right. In theory, one who does not have any sensitivity whatsoever and doesn't like hold by this Rebbe, they do not have a heter to not eat bread. And that's what I'm trying to say here, that you can swear to be a tzaddik, even though you're not a tzaddik, because there's certain ways that the tzaddikim are basically enabling you to raise your level beyond your level. It's like a gift that they gave you, like Matan Torah. You can do everything you can do. I can love the Rebbe, and all of a sudden I'm going to get a gift, and all of a sudden I can act like the Rebbe, even though halachically he had to like create a heter for me to do that. And in a certain sense, I'm trying to say that those are examples of the whole business of, for example, being a shliach, right? Which Rebbe wants every chassid to be a shliach. What is a shliach? You have like the power of the mishalech behind you. You don't have the power to go start a whole Jewish community on your own. But if you go as a shliach, you do every little thing you can. It's like the story that, you want to, Moshe tried to build the Mishkan. He couldn't do it. He just put his hands on it and it came together. Because there's a koach that comes when you do your effort, even though the thing you're trying to accomplish is way beyond you. This must be an ototi tzaddik, right? I'm making you swear to be a tzaddik because at some level that you have access to these levels, even though they're beyond your level. Okay.
The Rebbe didn't instruct us to do something like he did, depending on his life. There are things like that he didn't instruct us to do, like the way he walked around the bima after the Torah, like different things that he had.
Well, that's a halacha in the Shulchan Aruch. When you're talking about taking a circuitous route back to your chair, that you have to do that. It's not a Rebbe thing.
No, but the way you do it, I remember Rabbi Elizabeth telling me, like, the way the Rebbe did it is not the way we do it.
Okay.
Go left and not right.
Oh, okay, yeah. No, there's certain things that said the Rebbe said these are like inyanim of the Beis Harav. They're not shy for every person. There's definitely things like that. Some Hasidim took it even further and said, well, if the fact that we even know about it, I'm going to take it upon myself. Which is like already something a little debatable. But like, for example, the 4 pairs of tefillin, right? So I'm saying, even the Rebbe said he wasn't sure if he should do 4 pairs until the Frierdiker Rebbe told him. So where does that place you? You would never do it. But the fact that the Rebbe told us that he does it, and there's a Yom Yom where he explained the whole thing, how to do it, there are some Hasidim, some great Hasidim, some little tiny Hasidim who took it upon themselves. But either way, I'm just saying, it's like a hack. You have to decide whether you're like sort of want to take this kind of level on yourself, but it's not impossible. In other words, there are people that do it. There's someone that is here that does it.
Yeah, he does.
Rabbi Gafni, the elder. He doesn't keep it secret anymore. He used to keep it secret.
4 pairs.
4 pairs to fill it.
It's only for a Rebbe.
It doesn't say it's only for a Rebbe anywhere. It's just that only the Rebbes did it. Okay, let's go on to Os Dalid. V'yesh lomar. There is to say, Dezeu shatziva larog shiba amamin lichbosh es artzam hu nitzchi b'chol dor. right? This commandment to kill the 7 nations and to conquer their land is eternal in every generation. We're going to get lost in a footnote in a second. Av shechibush eretz shiva amamim hu haficha zayin midos the nefesh bahamis lekadusha. Even though, but how do we know it's eternal? It's something relevant for every generation. It's written in the Torah. Moshe's spies, shlach. In other words, only the Haftorah tells us about Yehoshua's spies. The etzem ikar idin is go conquer the whole land, right? And this is transforming the 7 midos of nefesh bahamis to kedusha. Inyan zeh shaykh l'tzadikim, right? Where this is really shaykh to tzadikim. Ve'ein kol adam zocheh lezeh, and not everyone can do it, as we just learned from the Tanya. Ki kol echad ve'echad miYisrael tzrich la'asos kol ma shebiachaltu l'kayem es hashavua shemashbi'in oto tihi tzadikim. Why is this? For the reason we just said. You have to do whatever you can in order to fulfill that oath that you took. So in other words, it's definitely relevant to you. You even swore on this regard to become a tzaddik, and that's why the Torah tells us about the conquest of Moshe's spies, because it must be something which you have to turn your attention towards, even though you could say, like, this is sort of not my business. You swore to this effect. Let's go into footnote land. So starting on footnote 17, where we said that the commandment to kill all the 7 nations is eternal in every generation. Going back. So he says, Muchach, gam mizeh she'atziva la'arog shiva amamin, nimna b'taryag mitzvos. Another proof that from the Torah, right? The Sefer Mitzvah of the Rambam, the positive mitzvah 187, it says that we have to kill all the nations of Canaan, right? It turns out that we did that, basically. But nonetheless, it's a commandment for all Jews. It's one of the 613 commandments, which means it's clearly not on a spiritual level, on a physical level. They're parallel. It's clearly for everyone.
Rabbi,
Yeah.
currently Canaans, campgrounds around here?
No, we killed them all.
Oh, man.
They also represent the midot and the emotions, right?
That's what I'm saying. So in other words, there's a certain level of where this, even though we have been saying all this time that really that's for tzaddikim to sort of attack their emotions on such a level, such a deep level where they actually transform their negative emotions to good ones. It's at some level relevant even for us, just as we're relevant to conquer the actual physical land. It's relevant on every Jew. It's a mitzvah. Even though this seems to be, this is the whole question that we're working with.
Most of the generation sends spies into your midot.
So that's what he's saying. If you have the koach of Moshe sent the spies. Isn't that exactly what we just got through saying? These pashtus of the Moshe b'chol dara v'dara. If you're like hanging onto this hack of standing on Moshe's shoulders, then Moshe can send the spies, and he did, right? And there's a mitzvah, Yehoshua.
I can't remember correctly, but wasn't there a king nation that like survived, like and like joined like work for us at like some point, like tricked us into letting them survive?
The Gibonim.
Yeah. So they're also dead, or
I haven't met any. I'm not sure. Anyway, but these mitzvahs these are mitzvahs that are noheg for the doros. In other words, they're something eternal. So let's look at that little star that's at the end of that footnote. And he says in the Sefer Mitzvah Sham, right, we're dealing with this same mitzvah 187, the mitzvah to kill all the inhabitants of the land. He says, this, that the commandment to kill all seven nations is counted as one of the 613 mitzvahs. So in other words, because this is something which is relevant to every generation, should the opportunity arise. In other words, even though, let's say we killed them, but if you could find one, like you just asked, you still have such a mitzvah. So in other words, the mitzvah is not done. It's just, I can't find an esrog. I can't do the mitzvah. But if I find an esrog, I have the mitzvah standing. Right? So that's basically the concept of it just being available to do if you should come across the possibility, or for those generations who had the possibility. But Panimius Inyanim, says the Rabbi Yeshlomer, in other words, in a deeper look, we could say Shekol Atariag mitzvahs no goes ladurus elishzeu beruchnis. No, on the contrary, even when you can't physically do it, the fact that it's a standing mitzvah, it's the will of God, means you can still do it spiritually. And there are such a thing as performing mitzvahs spiritually to the actual effect of doing the mitzvah. Where do we see this? Rabbi Shalom Bar Yochai, it says when he was in the cave for all those years, he didn't have access to a sukkah, he didn't have tefillin most likely, right? He was buried up to his neck in the sand, and yet it says at the level that he was on, he was able to accomplish by doing the mitzvah spiritually what we accomplish by doing the mitzvah physically, which is kind of a wondrous thing. But there is this idea of the performance of a mitzvah spiritually. And he says, Mahayir, Mahayidua, Shekol Adam Yisrael Tzrich L'Kayim Kol Taryag Mitzvahs, so he says, where do we, and yet another proof that this is still relevant to us. The Arizal says, and it's brought down in Tanya, a person has to continue to reincarnate until he does all the mitzvahs, right? Which means those mitzvahs are still relevant to you. He said, it's true that some can have been done in a previous incarnation, right? So maybe you could say, I did that one, but even spiritually, let's say if you didn't, you could still fulfill it, right? Maybe you didn't kill a Canaanite when the opportunity arose. So you still have to fulfill that mitzvah. How do you do it? Spiritually. Otherwise, you can't end this game. No, don't kill anyone, man. We're talking about spiritually. Shetaryag harizek neged evarim v'gidim hem gam kim b'chol hadoros. And the idea is that these 613 really is something it's also on a spiritual level. We know that these 613 represent the limbs of the body, right? There's 248 limbs and 365 sinews, and therefore every one of the mitzvahs is actually some kind of body part, right? And therefore, for sure, it's relevant for all times and all places because it's really something inward inside of you. Killing your Kanani, in other words, is what? Yes, it's exactly what we're saying, taking on your midos. Right? You don't have to have a Kanani out there to do it. You can kill the Kanani inside of your heart and you're Mokayim the mitzvah. Right? So it's so if you say it's only shaykh for tzaddikim, then you're going to have to perpetually reincarnate forever because you have to do that mitzvah. How do you do it? If Moshe sends you, you can do it. Right? Okay. Next. Footnote 18. So he said, wait a second. If this is something relevant for tzaddikim, we have this other side of the coin, which is that not every person is meritorious to have this opportunity. So he says, look at footnote 18. He says, skipping those parentheses, he says that now, even though when it comes to the basic love and fear, which is required in order to just do the mitzvahs, that everybody does have, must have, because as the Alter Rebbe says in Tanya, there he says, Perek Yud Zayin, Perek Mem Beis, he says that really in order to perform a mitzvah, you have to have, it's every positive mitzvah is really stemming from love of God at some level, even if it's a hidden love, or it's to go and take out the trash for your wife, even though it's the last thing you might want to do, you're not going to do it for somebody else's wife, right? You're going to do it because you love your wife. And therefore, that latent love is responsible for your actions. So therefore, there has to be some kind of love and fear inside of you in order to just simply perform the mitzvahs. Otherwise, you're not going to do them. So, okay, even though this type of love and fear at the level of what is necessary to perform the mitzvahs, everybody does have. That's what the whole Tanya is based on, right? This pasuk. The Tanya is purports itself to be an explanation of these words, that it's very close to you, this matter, right? To love Hashem. So the idea is that it's not something that you don't have already in possession of, at least the level of love and fear required to do the mitzvahs. Since you need those love and fear in order to do the mitzvahs, and you're commanded in the mitzvahs, so you have to have those, you have the potential for that love and fear. Seemingly, they would be included in merely conquering Yerecha, right? Because you're only sort of dealing with the love and fear which is required to change your machshava dibra ma'isa. V'in kibush eretz shiva amamin hi avoda da'ava v'yira atzma shlemaylu ambidas amavim nasiya. So he says, whereas when it comes to the conquest of the actual land, 7 nations of Canaan, this is a different level of the avoda on love and fear themselves. When, in other words, coming to a state, not just that you're going to love Hashem enough to perform, like it's a latent love, but actually what we're talking about when the 7 nations of Canaan, you have to come to a love where you actually fan the flames of the actual love and fear themselves, that's the avoda, right? That you're taking them out of their state of concealment, which is just enough to do the mitzvah, and you're actually becoming into a state of love. So this is what we're saying. Maybe not everybody is zocha to have that ability to affect themselves in such a deep level. Let's go down to the 2 dots and the 3 dots on this very same note. Umakol shekain shiluach hamaragim b'toras haaretz she'inyanuhu livchon es midas havayira. Right. So in other words, when it comes to conquering the 7 lands, this is a much deeper level of fanning the flames of your love, and how much more so when it comes to sending the spies to those lands, right? Which is basically like going and investigating and clarifying exactly where your love can be grown. Certainly, you're going to need to fan the flames much greater. And then finally, he says, when it comes to the Indian of working on the midos, on the love and fear themselves, as opposed to just their functionality of getting you to do based on them, but to actually bring them to a state of revelation that you're actually in love and actually in fear. On this, he says in 3 dots, here he speaks about this type of love and fear. Does everyone understand what we're saying? The difference between the latent love and fear, which is obviously able to be performed by every single person, otherwise you couldn't do the mitzvahs. So he's saying that's kind of like the Indian of the Yerecho, right? Of the idea of conquering Jericho, which that you can be commanded in, right? Because it's very close to you. You can do the mitzvahs. You're expected to do the mitzvahs. Therefore, you have to be able to summon the minimum love and fear in order to accomplish them. But now we're talking about not just the minimum love and fear, that you have it in a latent state, but bringing it to a state of actually like fanning the flames of your love and fear. So he says this type of avoda is compared to the conquest of the whole land. And in Likutei Torah, the very bottom of this page, the 3 little stars, he says it speaks about this type of love. That you can't do this unless you're obtaining the level of Moshe. That is not equal to every person. Not so the type of love and fear which brings you to do mitzvahs. That is what's called karov me'od v'nikol kol adam. That's what's easy and available to all, easy so to speak, but it's available to all people. So in other words, this footnote was essentially, don't forget, it's going on this place in the inside of the text where he says not everyone is shaykh to this, right? Even though we're trying to make an argument that you can do it too. So that might have been a confusing footnote, because he's basically trying to explain there are loves which are not really relevant to every person. This is obviously not going on the type of love which is relevant to every person, i.e. that love which is sufficient to get you to at least have behavioral changes. Okay, that was a bit of a detour. Fine, so going back, nonetheless, we're trying to make the point that it is written in the Torah, and there is a commandment in the list of 613 commandments to conquer the land, and you do make an oath, and therefore, even though on one hand this is seemingly not shaykh to you, and it's a type of love which you need Moshe to in order to accomplish, we still have to try to fulfill this oath of becoming a tzaddik. And that is why this story of Moshe's spies to go and spy out the 7 nations is written in the Torah. And what does the Torah mean? Hora'ah. The word Torah means an instruction. And if it's there to instruct you that there's something you have to do. That each one has to go and spy out and investigate your actual midos, your state of where your love is really holding. Are you loving, the physical self-pleasure, or are you loving God? You have to take a look. You have to spy this out. Shiyukulam lavaya. And you have to basically ensure, why are you spying them out? Because this is a preparation for conquest, that you truly have to get yourself to a place that your true love is only in God. Your true fear is only in God. In other words, it's a commandment. It's an instruction. It's written in the Torah. What does it say? You're reading it with memorizing it. I've heard both. I don't know. Lach. Okay. So it says when it comes. So okay. Nonetheless, even though it's an instruction, it's written in the Torah. You make the oath. It's one of the mitzvahs. You have to do it. Nonetheless, when it comes down to it, it says, "Send on your own initiative. I'm not commanding you." Ki ikarat tzivahu al machshava dibra ma'isa kibush yirecho. Okay, so even though you have to do it, you don't have to do it by way of command. It's almost like you have to bring yourself to do it as an instruction from the Torah, but not in the form of a command. And as we said before, because you have to do everything you can in order to do it, no one can command you, because at the end of the day, there's certain things that are out of your control to make it happen. Nonetheless, you're not putter from making the attempt. Yeah.
So is this some type of call to like meditatively do introspection on your emotions?
Yes.
Basically?
Yes. Where am I? If you're sitting there having all kinds of depression, right? About let's just
the world.
Yeah, or either the state of the world or your world, right? Your pipes are bursting and the sewer doesn't work, and so basically this is like affecting your personal status. Like your human is basically being bummed out over physical events that are happening to your life, right? So if you really had only fear of God, so what would be bothering you was your Seder. This would be sort of agitating you. Like, what am I doing? Not, I'm afraid I might lose some money. I'm afraid I might have someone's going to throw some bills on me that I'm not anticipating. Those are fears, human fears, right? But so you have a human heart. But the job of investigating, spying out your human heart is that you shouldn't fear anything but God. You can have godly fears. You can have human fears. That's why I'm saying no one's commanding you in this, because to get to this level, you really need Moshe for. But you should be paying attention to it, right? You shouldn't just be like, well, whatever, I'm human, so therefore I'm just going to let my human fears just go running without being checked. You have to be like, well, look at me. Where am I? I'm mamish fearing the wrong things, right? Like the famous story in the Baal Shem Tov, his father passed away when he was 5. And he gave him a couple lessons before he died. He said, love every Jew and fear nothing but God, right? These are your basic components of life. If you're fearing the collapse of the economy, you're not fearing nothing but God, right? If you're fearing missiles flying over your head, you're not fearing nothing but God. It's natural, it's human, but it's not what you were sent in this earth to be leaving yourself like that. And therefore, fearing nothing but God, what would your life look like, right? You'd turn into a Beinani. That's the interesting thing. If you're trying to be a tzaddik, you'll wind up a Beinani, because you'll be like, every second, what am I doing with my time? Am I wasting time? I fear God. I'm a servant of God every second. I'm going to get back to what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm not a free person to just take off when the whistle blows and do whatever I want, right? So if you're literally trying to spy out your midos, you're going to at least control that which is in your ability to control. So you can see how it kind of goes together. If you're shooting for the stars, you hit the moon. I think we're out of time. And even over time.
There's also been